Roll call when you're ready.
Paul? Paul?
Yes, present. Sorry, can't hear you.
Okay, hold on. Zane? Dan? Dan?
Here.
Joe? Donna?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And Dennis is planning on being here, so I think Dennis and Joe are still planning on joining at least, but anyway.
Okay, any items to be added to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Can we have an approval of the agenda?
Move we approve the agenda. Paul?
Second, Clemish.
Okay, voice vote?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Donna?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Christie?
Yes.
And Greg?
Yes.
All right. Agenda is approved. Do we have any conflict of interest declarations?
No.
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 Okay, hearing none, we can proceed to the agenda. We are going to discuss proposed changes to the subdivision regulation ordinance. You guys all got the email last week, so should we just go through that page by page, or what do you want to do with
I
this?
think what we'll just start with is, just to give some background again, is if you recall a couple months ago before John left this board, we had talked about, there was a discussion about the subdivision regulation ordinance, and what was brought up at that time was there was some discussion about the need to have one single process to where all plats went through just the planning commission and the county commission versus right now, currently, the way it is it can be just an admin approval by myself or going through the two meetings. And apparently there were some issues in the past that caused John to state that he felt we needed to go to one process and that planning commission and county commission would always do plats. And just for the record, Dennis is here now too. So so that's why this is in front of you. And I guess we can start the discussion from there, what people think.
Can we just go through this where items are strike? Or does someone else have a different way they want to go about it?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, this is Dan Clemish. As I understand right now, our subdivision regulation is totally separate from our zoning ordinance. And
Correct.
with what we'd like to do is basically make it a part of our zoning ordinance. And so I guess if we're starting on the first page, we'd just basically make it Article 28. And it would become a part of our zoning ordinance. Is that the understanding?
That is correct. Generally, all our ordinances, and what I'd like to ultimately see is that we have all our ordinances in one book, and they're all they're all together as different numbered articles.
I think that makes more sense, and it makes it easier for people to find it, to access it.
Correct.
The one thing, Madam Chairman, this is Dan Clemish again. The one thing I guess I did like is that this had a lot of the definitions within this chapter, because I guess one thing is that some of these definitions are probably slightly different than other definitions we have throughout the rest of the zoning ordinance. So that's probably a good idea that they're embedded in this, in this. So
I agree, and that's one of the things we've talked about, especially when we start talking about the Article 5 too, is that one thing I haven't enjoyed in the ordinance is that we've had to flip back and forth between definitions and the articles a lot of times, and something to definitely think about. It is handy to have them together.
I think that's a good idea too.
And so with that, one thing that I saw as I went through and I made a note on is that I think that's a really good idea. But if we go through, it has article, in this ordinance, it has Article 1 through, 11 or so. So what I think a good change right off the bat would be is instead of calling it Article 1 through 11, which may get confusing, how about we call it Article like 28-1, 28-2, and so when people are referencing articles, there's no confusion, because an Article 9, if you say that, now are you talking Article 9 manufactured homes? Or are you talking Article 9 of Article 28? So I think we should, if we do it this way, 28- whatever number.
That makes sense.
I think that's an excellent idea.
So-
Yeah, I think
so
that makes sense.
I just call it Article 28-1 all the way through 11.
Correct.
So we'll just make that change,
I agree.
if everybody's okay with that.
Sounds good to me. It makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zane's here also now, just for the record.
It looks like Joe might be on too.
Yep, I'm on.
Oh, okay, great.
So everybody's here.
Was there a reason we wanted to get rid of the definition of a sketch? Does it just not make much sense, or?
That's no longer needed just because of the fact that that wouldn't be part of the phases anymore. If we go with this direction, we wouldn't have a 3-phased approach anymore. We'd just be going
Okay.
straight to preliminary and final plats.
Okay. And if we go with this approach where we have definitions embedded in this article, then those definitions are really only applicable necessarily to this article? Is that kind of, so if we'd have a different, if our definition for subdivision was different in the rest of the ordinance, this one would take precedence? Is that kind of how I understand that? I mean, they're similar, but.
Yeah, and there's no reason that down the line that, we don't match them up. But
Sure.
Yeah, I had that question too. Are we going to have them in the front still and in each article? And then if we do, we better make sure they're the same.
right. And I think part of that will come with, depending on how we do Article 5, if we end up changing a bunch of definitions for 5, we certainly could do that up, all at the same time with the subdivision ones too.
On 107, I like the change that there's a set fee that goes away and it can be set by the county commission. I think that's a good thing because we all know expenses go up and up, and it's no fun having to change a zoning ordinance just to raise a fee here and there. So I think that's
Well, that was the thing, as you know, that we were finding too, is the issue was is commission was changing fees sometimes. Then, like you said, it didn't get changed in the ordinance. And
Yeah.
so in reality, it doesn't really happen until that changes.
Yeah. No, that's a good change.
That was kind of my question, is how are the fees set?
By resolution usually, but a resolution by the county commission. But in this ordinance, it spelled it out. And I don't think these have been changed for, what, a decade or more? Whenever this, do you know when this became effective, anybody?
2014. If you
Yeah,
look
so
on
it's
the
been,
first page, April of
quite some time.
2014.
Okay. Should we change the numbering on the sections as well? So should it be 281101 instead of section 1101 for certificates required, as an example?
What I did, Madam Chairman, is just that on like page 4 at the top, it says Article 1. I just put Article 28-1, and then there was section 101. But
Yeah,
we
that
could
makes
do
sense.
that too. But
Well, 2801 makes more sense. That's the way it's done through the rest of the book.
Yeah, I would just try to make sure it follows.
Yeah, it should be consistent.
yeah, I'd be fine with that.
2801, 2802, it makes more sense. It's more
Yeah.
cohesive.
I could go along with that.
Noted.
So Gary, the biggest change for this would be that, would this get rid of like preliminary plats, and it would just, all plats would go through the planning commission and then the county commission? Is that how I understand it? Or?
Correct. Yeah, so the biggest thing that came up was the fact that, you know, administrative plats are certainly convenient for citizens. Because if it's a one to five lot plat that doesn't have a lot of things going on with it, they can get an administrative approval and start selling those lots quicker. But the problem has been is that we discussed a couple months ago is that we're constantly having the issue where people are having the incorrect certificates on the plats. So a lot of them have still been coming to planning commission and county commission a lot later because they never went through the complete process, or they have those blocks on there when they wouldn't have been needed, and then we still end up taking them to those meetings anyway. So it's just been an ongoing issue.
So it sounds like the trade-off would be that, you know, the positives would be every plat has the same process, but the negative would be that the process would take longer. Because
Correct.
so and I guess we'll have to be clear on that, is that if they are going, you know, they how many, is it 10 days ahead before the planning commission and when you need all the material?
Correct. The plan would be that we would, if we go this direction, we would certainly send out a note to the developers and surveyors and things that we're aware of that, you know, they may have to start thinking about planning ahead a little more.
Yeah. I guess I see that as really the only downfall is the person that comes in 9 days ahead of a planning commission meeting wanting to get a plat, is they're going to have to wait basically, you know, a month and a week, you know, to get their plat started. But, you know, the trade-off is too that there's nothing stopping people from getting a couple plots plotted out. I think if I understand this correct, developers are hesitant to plat out a bunch early because then they pay more in taxes. So they
Correct.
kind of hold off on
5
planning.
years, but But yeah, that's been the hesitation from what I've been told. And but you know, I've always told people that if you think you're going to sell some lots in the spring, you know, think about bringing them in January or something, where you have your plat approval and everything, and you're ready to go then whenever they're ready to be sold.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something positive to be said about just having one process instead of multiple processes. And you support, you know, these changes then? I mean, this is something you'd like to see, Gary?
Yeah, I think it's consistent with what the planning commission recommended a couple months ago. And then the other couple things that we added in was, you know, I'd like to see us start getting like a couple lat longs on connection points to where, so they're easier to put into the GIS and things. And
that's page 14, right, where you talk about?
yeah, and then get an electronic AutoCAD file or Esri shape file also to help with those processes, because one of the issues that they have is just getting them, you know, correctly into the system where they need to be and things. So
another question I had was, are there anywhere in here where we require like floodplain development permits, or do we want to add that in, or do we just want to have that completely separate from subdivision?
well, there was a whole paragraph I added on page 8. There's the preliminary and final plats / plans, flood designated areas. But the floodplain development permit doesn't actually come into play until they start building. So
Okay.
so
Now
that really doesn't have anything to do with the plat.
Okay. Now reading this, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, when I'm reading this, like number 4 shall provide. So does this mean whenever they're developing something in the floodplain, it has to be 50 lots or 5 acres, or maybe I'm not reading that right? Number 4 on page 8.
No, all it's saying is that we're requesting that they provide the base flood elevation for those bigger subdivisions, because
Oh, okay.
they're gonna be required to, most of the time what happens is developments like that build like a whole subdivision in a floodplain, they have to build pads, and so they would have to know what the base flood elevation is, build a pad that gets above that so that they're not having to do that for each individual lot across the board.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Gary,
Yes.
how many, since you've been with us, how many administrative plats have you processed? Not ones that you should have that they had the wrong title blocks on or anything, but how many have actually come through? Is it significant? Is it not? Is it?
It's been, yeah, most of the ones since I have been here have been, it's probably about 50-50 between admin plats and ones that have had to go to a meeting. So
The ones that you,
we've probably processed, it's probably been about 1 plat a month. Yes. And it's probably been about 50-50 between administrative and ones that have had to go through the process, maybe 2.
I know we talked about some recent ones where the people wanted it could have been done administratively and the title blocks were wrong, and so it had to go through the whole process, and they wanted those, you know, sooner than later. But typically, even the administrative ones, is there a time crunch that you see on those, or is there?
No, not generally, but you know, a lot of those too have to go through the city process also. And so there's always some time involvement. The issue on the particular one that was from Tuesday night was just the fact that, as we talked previously, that they're in a hurry to sell the lot. In fact, we went to Tuesday night's meeting. They're selling the lot tomorrow, and they're trying to start building the house right after they sell it. And so they were in a hurry to rush it through. And again, it's the typical thing, you know, the planning, people got to plan ahead a little bit. If that's what you're trying to do, there's nothing that stops them from bringing those plans in months ago.
I think that's a good point, Gary. And I've brought this up before. People expect things within weeks or days or weeks and not months. The fact that if you want to sell a piece of property and you think you can do it in a week and the very next meeting or 2 weeks and get it done and lickety split, I think it takes a little more thought on the county's part, you know, to look at things and make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I just think taking a month or maybe a month and a half, 2 months is not a bad thing for something as permanent as a subdivision. That's my thought.
Yeah.
And I'll reiterate, you know, when we started talking of changes, I had identified a few things that, you know, I would try to hold to when making changes. And one of them is to reduce lead times and when it can be administrative, do it and this and that. But this is one where we continually have issues by having these three different options, I guess, or three different paths forward. And, you know, I'm going to kind of go back on my word a little bit on this one, because platting to me is not something, that you typically are going to say, hey, I want to plat this off, sell it today and start building tomorrow. I mean, that just typically is not going to happen.
And this might, you know, motivate people to, if you have a subdivision, maybe you have one or two, you know, platted out areas that are ready to go at all times instead of just, you know, waiting. I don't know. Anybody else got any thoughts? The process takes a little bit longer, but we're making sure we're doing it right too. So there's a give and
How long does it take from beginning to end?
Well, with the meetings being staggered like they are, it can take a couple months sometimes, but still there's nothing that keeps people from coming in 2 months earlier to get approvals. Absolutely.
Okay.
The biggest hurdle, Paul, is if you need a 10-day notice to be on planning and zoning. And so if you miss the window, we only meet once a month, and so right there you got a month. And you know, again, I'm typically for streamlining processes and reducing lead times, but I'm just thinking, if I'm developing some land, there's going to be some thought process going into it ahead of time. And I just can't, I'm not a developer, I guess, but I can't imagine saying, oh, geez, I'm going to just out of the blue decide that I'm going to develop this lot tomorrow.
Yeah, see, that to me, I'm with you there. I mean, they know it's before we have our meeting. And if they don't make it, it's not our fault.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more planning on their part.
Yeah, and that can't be that a rule. It's more got to be an exception. There can't be that many times that's going to be a problem. I would think it'd be pretty rare.
Yeah. And in fact, I think Gary, before you got here, we had it where people did a plat process and it was wrong because there's so many different ways, and then they had to start back at the beginning. So there are some people who maybe got through a little earlier, but there are some people it took much longer because our three different ways are too confusing. So, I think it's kind of a compromise is, going to one path that's straightforward as opposed to several paths that are not as straightforward.
Makes sense to me.
Well, if everybody's in agreement, I'll make was there any other changes besides the numbering before the actual planning commission meeting that you're seeing?
I didn't see anything else. If you could, make those changes to how it's numbered. And so if we can make it resemble the rest of the zoning ordinance as closely as possible in numbering, I think that'd be a good thing. I'm all right with keeping the definitions in this article for now, and maybe later on we can always address that, but I'm fine with keeping them just like this for right now. Unless somebody else has a better idea.
No, I think it's a good idea.
I had one other question on page 16. A collector roads, all one word, under D and E.
Okay, let me take a look here.
The teacher's coming out. I'm kidding, Paul.
Well, it confuses me is why the problem
Should not be together, and since I didn't change that section, I should have caught that.
Well, it's just something to catch, before we publish.
I agree. I'll make that change.
I thought that's what it was, but
For my time, but I'll take care of it.
So now,
can I? Oh.
Go ahead, Paul.
This is Greg.
Gary,
I got a couple.
or Greg.
This is Greg. I got Article 9, grading and drainage, and then erosion control plan, Article 10. And then I was just looking quick to see if there's any other places, but there's a couple things in there that talk about approval of the zoning administrator, but then at the end we take off. Right now is striking out the county zoning administrator certification. If the zoning administrator approves the erosion control plan or approves the drainage plan, how do we know that it's been approved by the zoning administrator if we don't have them sign it at the end?
We can certainly, there's a couple of ways we can go about that. I mean, we can certainly put that in the packet that the zoning administrator has signed off on that, or we can include the grading and stuff with the packet also.
Yeah, I just think anything in there where it says approval of zoning administrator is needed or can be approved by them if there's a deviation or whatever. There's got to be some provision. It's got to be a notation that there's actually a zoning administrator actually approved it somehow. So.
And I had that
That's all.
question also because I didn't know if that's been done in the past or not.
I don't know about the past, but I don't really care about the past. I think going forward just needs to be clear. Just make it clear. That's all. So if there's anything in there, that's all I'm making a point, I guess.
Sounds good.
So Mike, I have a question regarding preliminary plats. Are we essentially getting rid of preliminary plats?
No. We can still,
Well, I guess I should rephrase it. We're still calling it preliminary plats, but then when they come through later on, do those plats need to come in front of us again?
I think it depends on the plat. Some will, it depends on if somebody plans out a big area as a preliminary plat and then wants to final plat 3 lots, 5 lots at a time, or 1 lot at a time. That still gives them the ability to do that.
'Cause yeah, like the one the other night, someone might come forward. 'Cause I think what was happening before, they would have the preliminary plat. You'd come up and let's say took 20 lots platted out.
Right.
And you essentially had the pre-approval and all of these things it was kind of treated as a final.
Correct.
It just wasn't officially platted. And then when that lot was going to sell, they would come forward and get the final.
Yeah.
If during that final, they've got to come in front of us again, is it even worth going through the preliminary stage?
Well, I think if somebody wants to plat out a big area, it makes some sense to get some of that approval up front and get the plans all put together and things. And then it does save them a little bit of time when they come through the final process to sell lots and record them. Because at least then you can say that the overall concept had already been approved, and possibly their grading and drainage and all those things.
Yeah, my only, I guess, recommendation or thought on this is to keep, if it's been approved in a preliminary plat, if we're going to go that route, I would consider maybe just having the finals administrative, but I'm certainly not stuck on that. My biggest question was just if we're essentially, by doing a preliminary plat, are we just making them double the work, or is it better to just come in, once?
Well, the work's already done, so basically all they're doing on the final plat is highlighting the lot or two or whatever that they're selling and getting it recorded and things to finalize it.
Right, because they don't want to pay taxes on every one
Right.
as an individual lot.
But we'd still have the same issue that we currently have with administrative plats, where the issue with the title blocks and things, that's the problem.
Yeah, I can see that.
Gary, is there any way, if we modified this, or, wanting to get your expertise, where if a developer comes in and gets a preliminary plat and it's approved by the planning commission and the county commission, and there's nothing wrong with it, no variance needed, they're all the right size, could at that point, if it's already been gone through, just be administrative at your level where you approve it, and it wouldn't come back in front of the planning commission or county commission?
Well, that's what Joe was just saying.
Okay. Yeah.
But the same issue applies with the title blocks, is the certificates that we've had issues with.
Okay. So it's really
Yeah,
an
then
issue of the subdivider and the surveyor not having the right title blocks on the
A
plat?
lot of times, yeah, so then it ends up going to extra meetings anyway.
Okay. So there's gonna be probably some training involved for the surveyors on this as well then, to make sure they understand.
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned that.
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
we send out notifications to everybody and let them know ahead of time once we decide to move forward this way, if we do.
Yeah, that sounds good. And that gives people an option if you don't want to go through the longer process, get the work done ahead of time, and then it has the potential to go a lot quicker. So,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Is the preliminary plat process common? I mean, like up in Brown, did they go through a preliminary or just do the whole thing at once?
It was rare. Generally, we just did a preliminary and final plat at the same time, probably 95% of the time. But there were a couple of situations where, like up in a lake region, where somebody wanted to kind of give a plan for a whole quarter section or a whole section along a lake, and then just plat them, like I said, 0 to 5 lots at a time for tax purposes.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. I guess what I originally was getting at is, do we just get rid of the preliminary plat process? But that makes sense if you're doing a large area, and then just do final plats on a section of that at a time, or a handful of lots. So okay.
A lot of developers come in and do that. They just do a few at a time. Basically, when they probably got it sold. Any other questions about this subdivision ordinance? I have one. Are you going to require everybody to have a digital version of their plat, or will they be able to come in with a paper version?
No, I was proposing that they do both, but that's certainly up to you all. And like I said, the reason for that is it's helpful, and that's a lot of regions are going to that because it just makes the process for our equalization group to get it into the GIS system and things faster if they have it already drawn up in a CAD file or a.
So they can't scan it and program it in there?
No, then you're just warping it in. Basically, the accuracy is better if you have, and that's the same reason I requested adding lat longs on connection points too, because at least then they have a couple points that they can put into the system and go right to that where it should be. Not requirements, but it's certainly helpful if nobody has any issues with that.
Most likely all surveyors have digital capabilities now. Isn't everybody using GIS and all that for?
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah.
Pretty much all surveyors are using global positioning, so
Yeah.
they have the XYs already.
Yeah, I think it makes sense if it's going to save our departments a significant amount of work. Why reinvent the wheel for our departments if it's already available? I guess I don't see that as being a negative.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if it for some reason poses an issue down the road, we can address that in the fee portion, and you pay a higher fee if you don't have digital means.
Anything else?
I was curious about that.
Is there anything section chamber here about the flood designated areas, but there's prohibits from building in the floodplain.
Depends on the zone, of course, but like I said, generally what's gonna have to happen though is you gotta get above the base flood elevation. Our ordinance states at 1 foot above to build. So if anybody did subdivide in a designated floodplain now, or floodplain now, you'd have to meet those requirements, and they have to do pads to where they build up and get approval through FEMA to allow that, and then to get those properties out of the A zones.
There has to go through the FEMA process before it comes out.
Yeah, and so that would all occur at that time before they even start building stuff.
I know, I kind of noticed that too. And one thing I was wondering, like, so how does I know agricultural things aren't able to build in floodplains. How about like the sewers in those, so you have a housing development with open sewer system, how does that work?
Yeah, FEMA's concerned with the building stuff. The underground stuff, they don't get involved in. But yeah, obviously it has to be engineered to where it isn't causing problems and things. And,
Well, they'd have to get their septic.
and all your, yeah, you have to get your state approvals for your septic permits up front and those things. But like, yeah, any of your appliances or air conditioners and things all gonna be above that base flood and stuff too. But you know, even in the ag areas and things, like we just a few weeks ago, we had somebody that wanted to build a grain bin in the floodplain. They have to meet the same requirements. They have to be above the base flood, and you have to get elevation certificate showing that they're building a foot above the base flood. So
Better for the grain anyway.
yeah, keeps it a little drier.
All right, any other questions or discussion?
So basically, the intent now is to leave the definitions right in, create Article 28-1, basically, that's suggested, that leave these definitions in 28.
Yeah, currently, I think ultimately, at minimum, we've talked about even in the other articles that we want to move some of the definitions, at least copy them into the articles too, because we're having to go back and forth and find certain definitions in the definitions that aren't in the article. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have to do both. It should be one or the other, or at minimum in the articles, and you know, you're not searching somewhere else to come up with an answer.
All right, shall we move forward to Article 5?
Madam Chairman, I guess the next would be to just give this a first reading at the next commission meeting. Is that what?
That would be the plan, and I'll
Okay.
make these changes immediately and get them out to everybody, and then get it on the agenda for May
Okay, thank you.
12th.
Sounds good.
So who wants to start to discuss the Article 5?
So I'd make the first bit of discussion here, but who did all this work? Did you do all this yourself, Gary?
Dan and I went through, Dan did a lot of John, and I went through too, and so you had started, way back when you had it on the board here that you had started discussions, and so this is just kind of a starting point for discussion and just start getting thoughts and I know this is a big issue in the county and I think we definitely want to spend some time on it and get things to where everybody's kind of on the same page and hopefully moving forward.
I feel these changes are really hard to do in the social distancing time because I feel that there should be a lot more input from other people than versus via trying to get into the internet or I really feel that anything decisive, I mean, there's nothing wrong with discussing some of these things, but to get down to the final part of it, I feel that should be more open to larger
Right.
discussion.
And like we were stating, this was the proposed third revision, and so I think we felt there was going to be a number of meetings here going forward, and I think that from what Dan and I were talking about, I think our ultimate goal, like if we could even get it to maybe the July or August meeting, possibly, it might work out, and then if people still, that would give people time still then to, if they thought it needed to be referred to the election, then that would work out with the November election too. So that was kind of the thought process to start those discussions now.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to play dumb here for a minute. How does this align with what the governor's new proposals that were passed in legislature?
Senate Bill 157 you're talking about?
Yep.
And that was one of the issues too, that some changes that we were gonna make, that would go into effect July 1st. And so that's why we figured we probably wouldn't be taking this to a meeting until after that.
Yeah, I think, Paul, to answer your question, I think the governor's bill really kind of forces us to tighten up our zoning ordinance because, for example, if it only requires a simple majority of the Board of Adjustment, so 2 out of 3 Board of Adjustment members now can pass anything through the Board of Adjustment. And, that's unprecedented, going from 4 out of 5 to 2. And so really what that requires, in my opinion, is we really have to, tighten up the zoning ordinance. That's how I feel. You may feel differently than that. And, really that's something the citizens, I feel, are asking of us. Certainly Class F has been a huge controversy. It got to the point where certain owners were putting, hog barns 75, 100 feet from people's houses. And not all of us, but probably quite a few of us think that that's not right. Are we going to agree on all of this? Probably not, but I think this is a good time. These are suggestions. If you don't agree, offer a better suggestion on how it is, and it's an open discussion.
I think also, Paul, what 157 did really didn't touch the call it the meat of the details in the ordinance. The real long and short of it is it changed the voting requirements for approval for the BOA, and then it allowed special permitted uses, which a lot of counties already have special permitted uses. I believe what I'm kind of reading into is they are not defined by the state right now. So right now you can have permitted uses and then CUPs, and some of the counties that have special permitted uses, I believe there's one in a neighboring county that is being challenged. And so what that did was allow counties to have the special permitted use.
I was, like I said, I don't understand all of it, but I understand a lot of it.
Right.
And that's why I was
And
asking
so-
a question.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. And for anybody else that's on right now, and maybe I'm wrong, but essentially a building permit or permitted use is kind of a by rights permit where the zoning administrator and county essentially cannot deny somebody usage of or that permit. Where a conditional use permit, there's the hearing process, there's a CUP, the two hearings, and approval, and there's requirements aligned with that. And what the special permitted use added was kind of a blend of the two, where you can have essentially a CUP where you define the requirements and, up front say, okay, here's the requirements, and if you meet them, you can, then you can have a permit without going through the process. And that's where, we do not have that process in a lot of other counties. Some do, some don't. So
That makes more sense to me, is have a process.
Well, the part of the problem, and I think, we shouldn't spend too much time on the special permitted use because we don't have them, is they were changing special permitted uses. Things that should have been a CUP were special permitted uses. And the issue with that is then there's no public notification or even ability for the public to challenge things. And that, in my opinion, is a big issue with transparency. If things that should be a conditional use get switched to permitted use, to special permitted uses, then the public's right to know what's going on also goes away with that. So,
Okay, thank you. That explains it.
So before we, go down this path on what's proposed, can somebody, not me, somebody, just bring new members up to speed on what's been discussed and where we're at, so everyone's on the same page, I guess?
I believe it's still, I don't know, is it still on the marker board in the room? We kind of all agreed, if I remember right.
Yeah, we spent quite a lot of time on that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's still there. We all agreed that we need to raise the animal numbers up, okay? I don't think anybody agrees one animal unit should need a CUP. If you think one animal unit needs a CUP, raise your hand, because I don't think anybody does. But certainly there's a number where we feel a CUP would be required, and this is just new animal feeding operations. This is not ones that are established and have been going. This is for new stuff. And what is that number? We don't know. There was a petition that went around, what was it, a month or two ago, that got, I think, at least 500 signatures, maybe more. And what that was urging was 49 animal units or less, there's no CUP required. That's certainly higher than the one we're at right now. So I guess we could start there. I'm sure there's people who agree with that and there's people who don't, but what's everyone's thoughts?
Well, I think this is reasonable. This covers people who want to have 4-H animals or just want to have a few cattle that they want to feed and sell to their neighbors or whatever. It kind of takes the hobby people out of the equation.
And when was that
You know what?
discussion had, Dan? Because that was before I even started. When did you? do
It
this?
had to been what, September, guys? Was that September or so?
Yeah, it's been a while ago.
Been a while. I think everybody, I think everyone agreed that we need to raise that number up. I mean, what that number is,
It
we
was
might
September.
all agreed on, but I think we all agreed that number needed to come up from 1.
So that number, for those who are just joining us, is the number of animal units required for a CUP. And so historically, when the ordinance was adopted, 1,000 animal units and 1,000 animal units is 1,000. It's one animal unit's based off of a cow or beef. And anything under 1,000 did not need any CUP. It was just considered well, really wasn't considered anything, I guess. And so the ordinance now in 2006 was changed, and there's class A, B, C, D, E, and F. And there's different animal units assigned to each one, and then different requirements and setbacks for each class. And so class F is the lowest one, and that's from 100 to 299. And so, that's been a contentious issue within the county. And that's for, say the least. And it's something that
I don't remember any contention. I don't remember any contention about this.
No, and
so it's
think,
something that needs to be addressed, and we started down that path on what that number would be, what's acceptable.
Right,
Before
those are the
someone
numbers.
needs to come forward with the CUP. Yeah.
Right, those are the numbers you give us on page 2 on the animal units, A, B, C, D, E, F.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
And so animal units as a whole, it is another thing. So different animals have different numbers of animal units.
Right, I read that.
Okay, yep. And so that's where, I guess that's kind of where we started, or what we started discussing a while ago.
And Dan, didn't you say that there was a petition that said 49?
I believe that's what it was, that's what went out, and it seemed like many hundreds of people thought that was appropriate.
And we went with 50, which makes sense.
Well, it's a nice even number. And to back up a little bit, and not to throw stones here, but the Class F system that we have now has been horribly abused in the last several years. We had one individual that 1 week would come in to get a conditional use permit for a Class F. Then the next week, they would just get a permitted use, and it would go back and forth. So there's no consistency with the Class F. And I think that's something that we need to do. If the same person is going to have it as a permitted use and a conditional use, that doesn't make any sense. And so that's another reason that this needs to be tightened up. If
Okay.
When things are abused, you got to fix it. So that's I think one of the things.
See, the only change, I was looking at this, the only change, I don't see any great changes other than the E and F.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the only,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
that's just my point. I didn't see a whole lot of changes, and I thought it was reasonable. But
Yeah, the Class D is brought down too. And if you look at other communities like Davison and some of the other communities, they have everything from 500 animal units and above. They require DENR permitting. And so that was another change too, that was thought in there. So a Class D would be brought down. And I think DENR permitting brings a lot of good things in, because it's it's not a lot of oversight, but there's at least inspections of the facilities. Once every 3 years, there's an inspection to make sure that it's constructed appropriately and things like that. And all of those things that the state does, that's less the county has to pay for. if the county, if the state is doing inspections, then we don't have to hire an extra person to do it. So that's another option.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I did have one other question.
Mm.
I got to find it again now. It had to do with the distance from wells.
Mhm.
Anybody remember what page that was on? Oh, yeah, here it is. It's on page 9. Are there any farmers getting their drinking water from private wells?
Yes,
I buy drinking water from private well.
a large percentage, and I don't know what it is, of the rural population, and particularly on the eastern side of the county, get their drinking water from wells.
And I'm looking at that, and you 1,320 feet for a public well, which is drinking water.
Mhm.
And then you give me 1,320 feet from drinking water supply and all this.
Mhm.
Only get 350 for a private well. To me, that doesn't make sense. It should be greater. That's me. I'm just pointing out there's, you got a private well. Everything else that is supplying drinking water is 1,300 feet.
Yeah, I think that part of that is, you get sometimes, if your well is located close to a property line, if you go 13, for example, like 1,300 feet, that could go a long ways. We can certainly, raise that. I guess that's just, what was thought of, but I don't know, I guess to see what everybody else thinks. I know.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up, see what everybody else wants
Yeah.
to think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's 250 foot right now, is it not?
Yeah, that says, it's right. It says 250 foot now, but we moved it up to 350.
Okay.
I guess my thoughts on that, this is that most of these CAFOs will be at 1,320 feet away from a person's homestead, and more than likely their well is pretty close, their private well is pretty close to their homestead. That's just my thoughts on that.
Well, a lot of the older farms, though, they would have a separate well for livestock and residents. I know ours does.
It's still on the same, isn't it on the same?
It's on the same property, but it's not in close proximity.
Yeah. I kind of see what
It's true
Zane's,
that most people probably don't have that issue.
yeah, I kind of see what Zane's saying, though, kind of make, I don't know, that's something we can discuss, but, you don't want it too far. You want it far, but you don't necessarily want it too far. I don't know what the number is. That's just what was thrown out there, but it's valid points on both sides, though.
Yeah, see, just what our chairwoman just brought up, I had the same, what about animals? If their water gets contaminated? And I remember my uncle on his farm, he had 2 separate wells, one for the house and one for the animals. And
Yep.
they were a quarter mile apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand.
I just throw it out because like I said, I know a little bit dangerous, and that's about it.
No, that's a good point.
Well, I think it probably has a lot to do with the individual site plan and elevations and things like that. I mean, if the person is downstream from them or downhill from where a cable is going to be located, they'll be at a higher risk than if the residence has the high ground, so to speak. So it is an individual type of situation where it might not impact that at all, like you said, Zane. Might not even be an issue in most cases.
Are we going to start on the front page? Because I believe that you changed something on the front page. It says not to include animal feeding operations. Over 49 animal units or 200 head animals. I think that is nothing but a lawsuit just waiting to happen. since when we discussed their livestock and feeding of livestock. And then we put in that the KFOs are at AFOs and over 200 animals, period, not animal units even. I think that phrase right in there is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. I don't think Yankton County needs any more of those. That will be challenged. AFOs, KFOs, I don't care what you call them. I have an AFO. Haven't been there for 125 years.
This doesn't affect.
No, but if it gets sold at some time and somebody wants to move in there and it sits idle for a year, things are a little gray in that area. So I feel that part there is, I feel very wrong.
Is that the agriculture what would you recommend?
Definition.
Okay, what would you recommend, leaving it alone, or how would you write it?
Exactly.
You would leave it, you wouldn't do anything with it?
No.
Okay.
Because on one thing, I don't disagree with this. I don't agree with this. You're coming up with these animal units, and then we go to animals. I think that's the wrong thing to bring apart, because you might have 190 chickens, and you can only have one cow, and then you're going to get a CUP, and it don't take many chickens to make 190 chickens.
Yeah.
I do not agree with the splitting of the animal units. The state uses it. Everybody uses that animal unit for a measuring. I do not think Yankton County should be any different. Just my thoughts.
Actually, the state abandoned animal units and they go with animals now, and they spell out, and it's on the DENR website if you want to check, because it's, I don't know, Dennis, you might know this. It's 2,500 pigs, 1,000 cows, so many turkeys. So the state, they don't use animal units anymore. They use the number of animals based on animal units, if that makes sense. So
But
it's
it
not.
sounds like it's much larger numbers than what we're talking here.
Yeah, but the state doesn't regulate anything over 1,000 animal units unless required by the county. And so it's up to the county to regulate if they choose anything below that amount. You know, because if you have 999 cows, the state won't regulate you. If you have 1,000, they will.
That definition is what we came up with in September. That's what we talked about when we got to the animals, because because the 200, anything over that was obviously something more to be considered there than just, letting it just be, what am I trying to say? Yeah. Over 200 animals of any type, we figured was something that needed to be a little more thought put into. But this is actually the exact thing we agreed on in September.
Yeah, I think it's a big, if you use animals versus animal units, 49 cows, not a huge deal. 30,000 chickens or whatever, that's a huge deal. Chickens are what? Are they 0.001? It's a very, very small number. So to me, it's a big difference, living next to a few cows versus 20,000 chickens or 10,000 turkeys. I mean, and we have to kind of, if somebody's going to raise 10,000 turkeys, they should probably have a conditional use permit.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, Dan.
Yeah.
Not at least they're 0.033 animal units.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where we struggle, and we could really use your advice, Zane, is, so how do you have a differentiation between 49 animal units and cows and the 5,000 or 6,000 or 10,000 chickens? Because if you go solely on animal units, 49 animal units, the guy who raises cows gets 49 cows, but the guy who raises chickens gets thousands and thousands. And how do you differentiate that? That's kind of where we're struggling.
And 10,000 chickens are not a hobby farm. It's not a 4-H
Yeah,
project either.
Yeah. And so I think our thought
Well,
in September was if somebody is gonna have 200, no matter what they are, if they're gonna have 200 chickens, that probably should have some sort of controls on it. If he has, 49 cows, that's not a big deal. 200 pigs, 200 chickens,
Well,
maybe we need to get involved. I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
wasn't the idea behind that 200 number is that what we were talking about, if you want to call it a gentleman farmer, that has a little bit of everything. That was our concern with that number. Was that so you have 30 cows and you have 100 chickens and you have a couple turkeys and a goat and some sheep and whatever. That was what that 200 was all about. It wasn't trying to limit anybody in any way, but it was trying to make it actually accommodate the person that has a little bit of everything but not a lot of anything. But if you live next to that 200 mishmash animals, you, as a neighbor, you might be concerned about the the runoff and the smells and the distances and things. That's what that was all about, I think. I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it's nothing saying somebody can't have more than that, but if you do, you need a CUP. And right now where we're standing, if you have one cow, there are people who read it and say you need a conditional use permit for one cow. And so this is raising it up a huge amount, but just putting a little bit of safeguards on it, I think, it's so if somebody's got a better idea, I'm all ears.
Well, yeah, it was the whole idea. If you don't meet the threshold for any of the animal unit numbers, however many turkeys, however many chickens, one at a time. But if you had them all together, you still don't want. If there's 200 animals living next to you on my acreage here, if I could have 200 animals, of different sizes and shapes. But that might be a problem for my neighbors, at some point. So that's what the whole point was.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's addressed by the animal units actually just kind of talking through this. And I'm thinking of that, Dan, you mentioned the state goes by number of animals, species.
Based on animal units, yes.
And I would caution about, it doesn't sound like anyone's wanting to go down that path, but I would caution us to think about going down the path of species or number of species. And I say that because Clay County adopted that, and I was talking with their commissioners, and so under animal units, it's cumulative. So you could have 10, let's say you had 10 cows, that's 10 animal units, and you had 100 hogs. What's that times what, 0.4? So there's 40 animal units. So there you're at 50 animal units. Well, under what they did and considered species, you can have, let's say for their small AFO, you can have 2,500 hogs, 200 cows, 10,000 chickens, and all of those on one property. They're not cumulative. There's no way of making it cumulative, and that's where the animal unit came into play. Was when you have multiple species, then those animal units convert into just animal units, and that's what limits it.
Yeah, and right in our book, it says on our zoning ordinance on page 4, turkeys are 0.018 animal units. You could have like 3,000 turkeys and you'd be you'd be at 54 animal units. And, living next to 50 cows is one thing, living next to 3,000 turkeys, that's another thing if you ask me, so I don't know. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
How many chickens are getting raised in Yankton County, but I know that can change at any given time.
Yeah,
and that's what zoning ordinance is about. I think
You know,
the
and it'd
hobby
be-
farmers have well over 200 head of chickens.
Yeah,
You know, I think before we get too deep into this, I'd like to at least just make the statement or have people think, to me, the intention of ordinances and some of the planning and zoning is, I've always had the philosophy say that we should be doing the bare minimum requirements, as far as bare minimum regulations, as long as we are protecting, what the concerns are. And so I think we need to address what concerns, before we throw numbers out, what are concerns? And I guess the point is we have a nuisance ordinance. I know during our discussions, it was talked about, well, the guy that has, 10 cows on his place, his are over the fence more than the guy who has 500 cows, and it's more of a nuisance. And that's why, why CUPs are in place and why the requirements are. And I guess I don't take that stance. I think, to me, the concerns would be, water quality, air quality, that kind of stuff, more so than the nuisance side of things.
and
so
I think those negative effects are not really, you're not going to have a lot of those negative effects from small, depending on where they're placed, obviously, but smaller operations as opposed to larger ones. I mean, we still want the ability of people to raise livestock in Yankton. I mean, we all want that, but it needs to be located where it's appropriate. And we want people to be
right.
able to
And that's
have,
what I'm saying is what are the concerns? What with it, livestock operations and anything that we're addressing in an ordinance, what are the concerns and why are we regulating or why are we proposing regulation? And I'm just saying with that should be in the front of our mind when we're discussing this, I guess.
well, I mean, we don't have to make any decision on this tonight. I mean, we could all just think about it and get a better idea for the next meeting on the animal unit or whatever. And, this is just an idea. If somebody has a better idea, bring it up next month or something. I guess we could do that too. Or do you want to keep going to the rest of the chapter? Or do you want to stay on this point, or?
Do we have any
Is it-
suggestions other than 49 for the bottom? Because I think 49 is a reasonable amount for anybody that wants to be a hobby farmer or raise, animals for FFA or 4-H or whatever. I think that covers that base, especially when you raise the animals up to 200. That's just my opinion. If you have a different number you want to throw out there, I'm open to suggestions. We can discuss it.
I believe we had some hobby farm numbers in our.
Yeah, but that's as it relates to residential neighborhood. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about ag.
Well, I know, but that's probably the biggest problem. We're talking about ag, but then we're talking about residential.
Well, we're trying to accommodate people that want to have animals but aren't necessarily raising them for sale as a business. So we're trying to accommodate everybody that wants to live up there. And we also want to protect our air, land, and water.
So let me ask this group one thing, and I believe I've had a discussion with this other people. Who are we to determine how many animals it takes to make a living? I mean, right now.
We're not stopping anyone from making a living.
No, you're missing my point here, but every level, every time we change things like this, and we get more regulations, and we always think we're trying to protect the small farmers. A lot of these numbers are small farmers. I feed 500 cattle every day. I'm a small farm, but yet I still produce manure. I still produce the smells. And I have acreage owners right around me, and we spread it right on their land. The 75 feet thing that we talked about earlier, I don't agree with that. I do agree that smaller units should be at a quarter mile with the next class, you know. I do agree. I think that 75 foot is a bogus. I don't agree with that. I think instead of changing all these things and maybe just putting in a class G like we talked about before for some smaller ones and leaving out everything else alone, moving these setbacks to a quarter mile and get away from all these red lines and bickering over things. I think a lot of this would go away. And I really do.
It's been 20 years since this was started. We have technologies and we have a lot of mitigation things that we can do to make this safer for the neighbors and more palatable for the neighbors. And I think it would be irresponsible not to embrace the technology and the innovations that have been made in agriculture in the last 20 years. So
Yeah,
I think the whole thing alone is not being responsible to the future.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to say, thank you, Zane, and to your credit, you did vote against those ones that were placed that close to somebody's house, and we do appreciate that. Well, let's go to setbacks, and let's talk about setbacks and see if we're all on agreement. If we can, if we skip forward, because right now we have two different setbacks in the county. We have setbacks for the lake area, and we have setbacks for everybody else. For most of the people I talk to is, why is somebody who lives at the lake have a bigger setback than everybody else? So I think the proposal with this is just make one setback throughout Yankton and treat everybody fair. And then it sounds, Zane, if I heard you right, you're in favor of a setback, a quarter mile setback for Class F. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. No, that's great to hear. We agree on something. That's good.
I said that before when we were doing all this other stuff and all these numbers and
yeah.
And it's like we're going through a lot of work here. I think that because if we can't build a small agricultural business a quarter mile away, we're in trouble. And yeah. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but of course I am a farmer, and I know we have other farmers on here. But right now, agriculture is in a lot of trouble. And this fall is projected we could have $2 corn. And I have neighbors that say they're not going to plant corn because they're not going to have any place to sell it unless it goes to an elevator and goes through livestock, because the ethanol industry, they feel, is going to be down for a couple of years. So maybe $2 corn is all right with the rest of you, but if we could somehow utilize more through livestock, that is that's the way I feel.
Yeah. No, that
makes sense. What's livestock going to be worth? Well, livestock's not going to be worth anything either. You can't slaughter it. Yeah. What's a pig going to be worth this fall? What's a pig worth right now? You can't slaughter it. So what are you going to do with it?
That will change. That will change.
Well, it's all going to change, but I don't think I want to plant corn or raise a pig right now. But we can't worry about economics when we're trying to decide about water and air quality and nuisance to your neighbors. Really, I mean, if we were worried about economic impact, we would throw out half the subdivision regulation too, so make it easier for people to build houses. I mean, we can't look at everything from from the profit standpoint of the people that are doing it. We have to look at it from the quality of life. I hate to use that term because I'm not part of that group, but the quality of all our lives and all our existences in the county. That's what we're here for, right? So.
And that's why I suggested a farther setback for those smaller operations.
Yep, I
Zane?
agree.
Well, I think this is actually really good that we're agreeing on the setbacks. So we agree, does everybody agree on the Class F setbacks of 1320? It sounds like everybody does.
Yep.
What about the other setbacks? It looks like Class D, Class D and E, the setbacks were the same. I mean, I'm guessing here we agree that the bigger a facility is, the larger the setback. I mean, that's kind of how our zoning ordinance is written. So a Class D and a Class E would have a Class D would have a bigger setback than a Class E. Where are we at all on that?
I think that's a logical assessment.
We got 4 mile, 2 mile, 1 mile, 3/4 of a mile, half mile, and then 1/4 mile.
I think it looks good as it's proposed. I think that's reasonable.
It's a much more logical progression the way you just explained it.
Yes.
I think from what I've heard, the one thing that always works is distance. So I don't know, does somebody have a better idea than that? I mean, it does sound like we agree on the basis of setbacks. If we agree on that.
Yeah, I think that's a plus.
Okay. And do we agree that there should be uniform setbacks through Yankton County? I mean, do we think there should be a separate setback for the lake area, or do we think they should just be the same everywhere?
I think they should be the same everywhere. I think
Yeah,
it's.
I agree with that, Dan.
That's the.
I like,
Basing the lake area
There.
setback on, because you can't raise livestock.
That's what I was wondering.
yeah,
You can't raise livestock south of Highway 50. You can't have a April or April south of Highway 50.
I think you can, you just have to have a bigger setback.
No, it's right in the ordinance that there's no capos can be built or constructed between, West City Limits Road, basically Yankton, and Highway 50.
Could you,
Right.
could you
can't-
point that
you
out
can-
to me so I
Across the
can read?
road and build
You-
one.
You cannot have you cannot have a CAFO in that area defined. That setback, the different setback that you're talking about, that's to that border. So from Highway 50 south, you got to follow those setbacks identified from that boundary, if I remember right.
I thought it's stated right in the ordinance that you can't build at all down there. The only one that was ever built south of Highway 50 was Jerry Law's unit right at the beginning of the zoning ordinance, and they were the last ones to get permit to be able to build on the south side of the highway.
Yeah, I think you're right. There, you cannot build.
And you don't have anything anymore.
No.
Well, that's only Class A and B, though. If you look on page 48 of our zoning, 49, that's only A and B operations, though. That's not C, D, E, and F. Am I right on that? That's what it seems like to me. I guess I'm not opposed if somebody meets.
It does say new Class A or B.
So, I mean, if somebody meets the setbacks in the lake area and they own land, I mean, and it's an ag, if they should meet the same criteria as everybody else. I guess that's my thought.
All right, so we agree on the setbacks. What do you want to discuss next?
And we'll revisit those classifications. time. I'm still not opposed to that G, making it for those smaller ones. I don't know, what do you think, Dennis?
I think it should be, because I think that if we have an issue where it's only described as a hobby farm here, but it really doesn't ever come up. It is never really enforced that there should be that class. We have to be down to one animal.
Right. I think probably the biggest problem that we're having is that we want to somehow get away from this 299 animal units, so we can't build a nursery without a CUP. That's the elephant in the room. I think that's the thing that really needs it. And if we could change that setback to a quarter mile for those smaller nurseries. And do we need a CUP? I mean, that's something that, I think it's fine as long as we don't throw a lot of special provisions, like monitoring wells in some of those little barns. I think that's going to meet a lot of resistance. I think if we do some setbacks and think about the maybe some other things we should do with that, because that is really the elephant in the room, I feel.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Zane. The only thing is we need, are you and Dennis, are you guys in support of raising the number from 1 up to another number? I'm not gonna tie you to it, but are you okay with raising the number up to a certain level where no CUP is required?
I am.
Well, we've already got it up to 50.
Well,
Yeah, I know, I'm just clarifying, but I mean, do you, Zane and Dennis, do you guys both feel those Class F nurseries should require CUPs? I mean, to have a setback, they pretty much have to have a CUP. Because you're not going to be able to mandate a setback for something that doesn't go through the CUP process, as far as I understand.
I don't know, I think that's for further discussion or maybe a later date to get some more input on that. We've got that lag in numbers, if we go from 0 to 50, and then so 50 to 250 or whatever is going to be, so you don't need any CUP also. Why does it stop at 50? You know what I'm saying? Why doesn't it go to 1 to 250 or 260? Because like I said, it's the 299 nurse like I said, the 2,400 head nursery just falls underneath that 299 number.
Yeah.
I think they're 260 is where that, if I remember right, that falls in.
260, it depends on,
Is that what it is, Joe?
I think so.
It's
So
240,
I think
they're
basically to what,
they're 0.01.
to what Zane's getting at or whatever, it would be just go like 1 to underneath that, 1 to 200 is nothing, and then CUPs kick in after that.
Yeah. Well, but if we do that though, then 200 animal units is like 8,000 turkeys. So, I get what you're saying and it makes sense, but if you don't put some limit of animals on it, somebody, and it might not be today, might not be tomorrow, is going to come in and put 8,000 turkeys right next to a housing development or out in Riverside Acres as a permitted use. And we all know that's not going to fly. So I believe, and Dennis, you were on the board when the reason, why did they go all the way down to 1 animal unit when they did this? Do you recall that?
But back then, though, there was no restrictions on that. Because you had to include everything. I mean,
Sure.
you can't,
Okay.
part of the zoning thing is, everybody has to be affected. So you didn't take just for granted because you were, it's a little bit like you were just saying too, Dan.
Yeah.
If I wasn't if I didn't have, right now where we have a class F and the proposed number is 50 to 199, somebody would come in here and have 49 and wouldn't be included. It might be a bigger issue than the one that was the 50, so
Yeah,
took it down to 1, so everybody was included. We just didn't put any restrictions or, you know, need for conditional use on them to make them, you know, it was a permitted use at that point.
And I believe, Dan, that across the state, that was pretty standard across South Dakota, that they all started at 1. And a lot of that also was just to get people in the door to start with, to explain a project that they were doing. They wanted everybody to come in that was planning something like that.
But I think, personally, I think we're kind of on the right track. As far as the animal units thing, we gotta come up with numbers. I mean, that to me is the issue with that. But with Zane talking about, you know, getting that 1320 setback, that quarter-mile setback, is gonna affect a lot of the smaller ones that will, you know, you can basically, okay, here's your requirement for a class F, your 1,320 foot setback. That's it. There's nothing else required up to that point, but it at least brings it in, you know, so it's on the radar about what's going on that deal. If something happens, then, you know, all these, I think it's been discussed forever that at any point, one of these units, even though they're not required to get conditional use other than the setback, becomes a problem or a nuisance, then it goes to the full process of you get turned in, you come before the board, and then, you know, it's no different than violating DNR requirements on manure management. And then you've got to go back, and then if you weren't on that, if you were grandfathered in before that came in, then you got ran into a problem, now all of a sudden, now you got to comply with everything. You got to bring everything back to the table when you start over. It was just taking a initial chore of getting the conditional use up and, you know, right away. But with doing it this way, with just, you know, like say on a class F and whatever we come up with for numbers, whatever, the only requirement is a 1,320 foot setback.
I think it eliminates a lot of problems. Then I know, Dan, you keep talking about having 8,000 turkeys or 8,000 chickens, and I guess anything's possible. I've been in agriculture and livestock development my whole life, and most of the time, if somebody's going to come in with a chicken or a turkey, they're going to be at 150,000 or 200,000. I've never known a farmer to have 8,000 turkeys or chickens, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen. But in all my life, I've never seen that.
We used to have a mink farm just down the road down here. You don't know what people might decide to do.
But, you know, the issue too is, whether it be turkeys, chickens, pork industry, whatever, if you don't have a connection to that packing plant, that final product, you'll start.
Just start it up. You will not be able to sell markets.
You see bison and llamas and all kinds of things nowadays, so.
You're right.
How many turkeys do the Colony boys have over there?
Not a clue.
Per barn, or how many barns, per total?
What's that? Per barn, what do they put in a barn?
I think most of those barns are 20,000, 20 to 30,000, somewhere depends on the colony and what they're.
That's what I was thinking, yeah, they were up in that.
You know, but they'll put, you know, because it's a flow through thing, so they have barns that have birds coming up, you know, continuous flow. You know, growing up, you remember the turkey trucks went through town once a year, and loaded with turkeys went up to Blue Mountain, Minnesota, in the process for that, but now turkey trucks are always on.
Every day. Or,
That run over the English guy up on Highway 37 last week.
oh, it was, yeah. Okay. It's seen it, yeah, very good.
But they, I believe the counties own the old, built a packing plant in Huron that processes the grill.
All the colonies produce for them.
Pardon?
I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, Oak Lane, all them, there's several there are co-op that all belong to that.
Yep.
It sounds like we need to think about that a little more. I guess everybody think about that and get an idea, you know, on what you think is best. There were some other things, I don't know if we want to keep going, but on section 513, or I'm sorry, on section 515, number 6, I know there's been a lot of concern about sanitary drainage and stuff, so it looks like it got added in that water and sewer and sanitary district systems shall be installed by a licensed installer and shall apply with DENR regulations. I mean, does everybody agree with that? I think any septic system, you know, should have to comply with rules, and from what I understand now, this is what's being required, so there's no reason that shouldn't be in our ordinance. Does anybody have an issue with
What's that
that?
section again?
Section 515.
515, number
Yeah,
6.
515.
But Dan, this is Dennis, isn't that in the South Dakota law now?
I believe it is.
I know that several
yeah.
of them around me that you can go online and get a certified septic system installer permit, but you have to take it's like the pesticide test. Take online, and then you can become a certified septic system installer, but you have to go through their online class or whatever to get it done. But it's a requirement, I believe, that's required by law now.
Sure.
But it's a good idea to have it in the ordinance because people
Yeah, no,
would say,
I
I
don't
didn't
have
know
any
that.
problem with that.
Does everybody okay with that, or just that fine? Any
Yes,
issue
I
with
think
that?
that's a good idea.
Okay, and then 517, if you look at that, to me, that means basically, if you look here and in the definition, any vegetation over 30 inches, basically the zoning administrator has to cut down. That would include people's corn, and I just think 517 is unenforceable. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts is. If we can't enforce it, you know, why would it be in here? It's also on.
The only point I would make on that, Dan, though, is on number 1 that's lined out. When somebody comes in for a building permit for a new machine storage or grain bin, that it's not back, because when we originally put this stuff in there, we talked about the trees, windbreaks, bale agricultural products, with the request of the highway department because of snow drifting across the road, especially on the north and west sides of the road. They were causing major problems on a lot of the country roads in the wintertime. So it used to say, and I'm not sure, I didn't read through all this, it used to say everything had to be removed by November 1st.
Okay.
And then the other thing with the buildings, I understand the deal with cornfield, that intersections you can't tell and they're dangerous as heck in the summertime. But that isn't something that's enforceable. But if they do come in for a building permit, structures, or they go to NRCS to get tree plantings to plant a shelter belt, I think NRCS has rules about how close they can plant to public right of way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Spots. One of the problem areas north of town where they planted trees just basically in the fence row now. It's on their property, but it's going to block from the northwest.
But like out of here at HSC,
Yeah.
it's the world's worst spot in the time.
So I don't know that I'm,
Well, we could leave number one.
Yeah, I think that,
removing number one just for the simple fact of the things that might be added, come in for building permits that you would be aware of already, stuff that's existing, we can't do anything with. But not to,
Yep.
not to encourage any more being built right this road.
Yeah.
Good
You know,
idea.
and from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you read section 515 is, basically those are the setbacks of 75, feet. And so there shouldn't be anything closer than 50 feet if the setback is 75. And I know there might be, but technically if somebody's building something 50 feet from the property line, that's a variance. And so they'd have to go through a variance to do it. I get your point and I'm fine with leaving it, but that should be.
Everybody else is been the
Well,
worst. I've seen it many times, neighbors have done it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we actually had other township, we told the guy, move them bales, because we ain't plowing you out.
Well,
Yeah, and this this is enforceable, Dan. I mean, we have people move their bales, and we have,
Yeah.
the traffic visibility triangle. Like Dennis said, we certainly don't want to encourage anybody
Yeah.
to do that. And if you read through the actual, look at the actual traffic visibility triangle, that might be goofy. So I would leave number 2 in there and then fix the example of the diagram or whatever they have in there
But
myself. And I think
number 3,
Go
though,
ahead.
I mean, do we want to get rid of number 3? I mean, if you read it right now, no vegetation between the height of 30 inches and 10 feet. I mean, that would include somebody's cornfield and I just don't see how that is enforceable, but I'm able to
Can't do it.
listen to you guys.
1 and 2.
Yeah, I think part of the thing though with number 3, Dan, if you drive Old Highway 50, east of Yankton in the summertime when the corn's 9-10 foot tall, those
Yeah.
guys who were farming clear down in the ditch were actually past the right of way, and the county had to go out and drive
Yeah.
a post in the ground to get them to get back up on their land because they were planting right down to the middle of the road ditch. Yeah, and I think that was where that stuff was going on at the time this was put in there. It's like Joe said, it's a thing that comes as the traffic visibility triangle becomes an issue. And not, out in the country roads or the township roads, we're kind of, everybody's at their own mercy, but on some of the major county highways where there's traffic that's nonstop, there's not a stop at an intersection or that's blocked, it's.
Not only that, they have the damn deer jump right out of the cornfield, right on your windshield too.
I always look at the one that comes off of, goes east out of town, Old Highway 50 and was it Bill Baggs Road or whatever, intersection of that place there, and that lady has those lilacs or whatever, right? You have to just about pull out on the highway to see anything coming from it. I asked about that several times to get that, but they don't ever cut them back, but it's, I don't know that we have to leave all of it in there, the vegetation thing. I just think that we have to be aware of the traffic visibility. The other thing would be is that up in the minimum yard requirements, if you wanted to move like number 1 from 517 up into there, but just make sure that you identify drain bins, trees, windbreaks included in that setback instead of making it separate.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, yeah, and I don't know if you guys have your zoning book, but if you look on page 29, where it talks about a visibility triangle, it has an illustration in there. If you look at that, I mean, that's a huge chunk, and I guess to put that, approval of any tree planted in the zoning administrator, I don't know, we should probably either get rid of it or reword that.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I mean, technically somebody's corn is over 30 inches and he has to, if you read that, technically you got to get permission from the zoning administrator for that. And I don't know if we want to just, I'm fine with keeping one. And if people want to keep number 2, I'd be okay with that. But I really think we should get rid of number 3 and just delete it unless somebody has a reason to keep
Well,
it.
okay, if you get rid of number 3, what stops them from planning all the way right up to the edge?
Well, I mean, that's what's happening now. I mean, people are, if you look at the visibility triangle, people go right to their corners.
But they don't cross into the right of way, right? Do they cross
Not
into
that
the
I
right
know
of
of.
way?
But yeah, if you look on page 29, how I read it, and I could be wrong, doesn't this cover a portion of the individual's personal property? If your corner of your property, 30 feet over and then 30 feet over, in that triangle, you're not supposed to have anything above 30 inches. That's how I read it, and maybe I'm wrong. But is that how everybody else reads that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, but, and I'm not saying we don't need to fix it, but I just want to point out that it specifically calls out perennial vegetation. It's so it doesn't, does not apply to row
Yeah.
crops or anything. It would be trees, shrubs, any perennial vegetation. So,
But I mean, do we want the zoning administrator to have to enforce that? I don't know how you do that in the first place. And it just, I don't know. I'm okay with rewording it, but I just think it's unenforceable as it is. And so,
Annuals, one you plant every year, perennials wasn't planted to effect. I think it's the corn thing.
One thing, the biggest problem, I think, we have volunteer scrub brush trees, and so 5 foot by, that we never get after
Can
people.
everyone hear them? They probably.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said, well, one of the biggest things on the township, and we have a tree ordinance in our township that we've made people cut trees, but it's just scrub trees, volunteer trees in a corner post right by an intersection, and all of a sudden, it's like, you said, you gotta pull out an extra 10 foot just to be able to, see it. So, we just tell them, hey, can you cut that tree down, please? And they do.
So what you're saying then is you don't think it's really necessary? Because if you ask them, they'll probably comply.
Yeah, but that's in a township level. We're all neighbors, we're 35. In a county, it's a little bit different. It is. Not everybody knows your name.
so what's the thought? Leave it, get rid of it, keep part of it, rewrite it?
Leave it.
All right.
Leave it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it hurts. It really doesn't hurt anything as far as like I said, some of this stuff is just.
Okay. I can go along. Section 517 is done, guys. We didn't do anything. Accomplishment. So,
Yeah,
I have a question on 505 where we had a swimming pools into permitted uses and structures. I think that should be, it's fine that it's in there, but I think it should be clarified as residential swimming pools.
Good idea. Or have a
If
sign.
you're in an ag district and for, if you decide you're gonna have a commercial, if it would be, so that it is.
that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That is a good idea.
I had made a note on there, size or something, but if you put it as, same difference.
Yeah, I don't want a water park to show up.
No.
Across the street.
You know what would probably be better is just just delete this off of here and look at changing the definition of swimming pool and then just change it in all districts. Would probably be better because you guys are just talking about private pools, right?
Right.
Not water parks or anything. And I think we need to change the definition of swimming pool too, because it's caused some problems in the past. So I'm fine with just deleting that off of there, and maybe we just tackle that at another time when we do it if we do it with all the other articles, because right now swimming pools are conditional use permits in every article, and they probably don't necessarily. I mean, does anybody feel a residential swimming pool is a conditional use, or should that be like an accessory use, like a garage or something?
I don't think it needs to be a CFP.
Yeah.
Well, it has listed here under permitted accessory uses, so.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
It was a conditional use, yeah. I'm fine with just leaving that off, and we'll tackle that one later.
In section 503, I've got 3 questions. The dwellings 2-family, dwellings multifamily, and parks. Somebody please explain to me why we need a 2-family, multifamily, parks in an ag district. Gary, you?
I gotta agree on certainly on the multifamily. I don't think we want multifamily out in ag district.
I know.
2-family, I could see 2-family, well.
That's like a condo.
That's like a duplex.
A duplex.
A duplex are getting, pretty common, I guess.
Twin homes thing.
Yeah, I guess I can understand multifamily, and I'm fine deleting that off of there, but I don't know. Is there a reason why I guess a 2-family wouldn't be?
If you can have two, there's a lot of farmsteads with 2 houses on them. What's the difference if we put them all together into one house?
Right, because I mean, I'm not saying it's a huge movement, but there is kind of a trend, let's say, on elderly parents moving in with their adult children. They're empty nesters because the nursing home costs are out of this world. And I can think of a person I know that actually built onto their house so that they could take care of their mother. The husband had passed away and she just needed some supervision. She didn't need nursing care, but she wasn't safe to be on her own. And especially with the growing Alzheimer's population, I mean,
I don't see any problem having, we have 2 homes for family farm unit or whatever the verbiage is. And, having a duplex or a 2-family dwelling is really no different. I would say we need to limit it, though. We don't want a bunch of condos, I think, is the intent. It's a commercial versus family member, I think, is probably the difference.
Are you talking 2-family or what? Or are you talking multifamily?
Yeah.
Well, what about like dwellings? Well, yeah.
I mean, to me, like a multi. I mean, if multifamily, all of a sudden you're in apartments and things like that, and those belong in residential areas or town.
I can agree with that. I mean, if that's what people want, move the multifamily. I think it is in conditional use now. Just leave it there. Everybody's in favor of that?
Well, and so on a dwelling 2-family, do we put a CUP on it? And I think it's great. I wish my daughter takes me in someday. I think so. But the biggest problem, and I think we had an instance where a guy had given a lady 20 acres to build a house across the road from her ailing mother. He had died, and it was his dream to come home. And I think it's great. I would actually rather have the 2 people on the same parcel of land. I was a little opposed to that because unfortunately, life happens. There's divorce, there's death, whether we like it or not. And what worries me when we look at these things, so it works great for my daughter to take me in and Sandy in. And so when it goes to that next level in another 30 years, 40 years, you have to find somebody that also wants to have that same kind of a situation. Or then do you have two separate owners? I mean, you know, I'm just throwing out scenarios. I'm not judging anything. I've had a conversation about this even in the ag districts where one of the boys moves to the dad's houses. He builds a $300,000 house. And all of a sudden now the dad retires and now the boy moves from his $300,000 house and he moved to the main farm. And now he sells that $300,000 house to somebody that isn't real ag friendly. It gets to be really, really hard. And I know it's a little bit convoluted from this thing, but to try to understand sometimes how I feel, I want you guys to understand sometimes when I'm coming across how I feel, because I've seen these things in the last 62 years. And I know you have too.
Well, and like I say, all the intentions are good.
Right.
When you start out, that's what happens afterwards. And, you know, none of us know where that's.
But I think that's one of the big concerns with this trend of the shop homes and things too. And that people outside the families are gonna eventually be moving into those places and things. And I know that's been brought up. I think one of the reasons I think this was added in, from what I was told, is there was some discussion in the past about having consistency throughout the ordinance, where literally every zone would have the ability to have some kind of dwelling. But because you have zoning currently that, like we just had one this week again, that it's a residential house in a commercial zone. You look at the zoning ordinance, commercial zones don't have residential use, but yet it's there already. It's been there for 30, 40 years already. How your ordinance, how your zoning map ever kept that as commercial, I don't know, but these are the issues we're running into. And so when we have, you know, if you add all that ability to the zones, then those kind of things, at least you're not trying to figure out some way to bring it into compliance all the time. But there's a big section out east, bunch of subdivided lots that are in a commercial zone that are residential homes.
Part of that, though, if you go back, I mean, I can remember back in the probably early 70s when there was talk of zoning in Yankton County at that point, because of this stuff, like you said, you're building a house over here and they build a manufacturing plant next to you because there was no rules.
Right.
And zoning wouldn't even come on the radar. You know, the minute it was said that person was put on a rail and shipped out of town, you know, basically you're not to do that. But that's what now we have to deal with it.
Yeah, we're paying for it now.
And to build the zoning maps, you know, with the commercial districts and the different residential districts and stuff like that, you couldn't go out there and draw a line around all the different things that didn't fit in what you were trying to create already. And that, you know, I think that was where that controversial comment came up, or rule that was in the zoning ordinance that I believe that we've struck out of there now, is with not to encourage their survival. If they're in a district that's not compatible and they're not meeting the requirements, was not to encourage their survival. Well, somebody wants to buy that property and keep surviving, and I'm not against that totally. Right? But then we also have to go back on, and I just reread part of it today again. You know, our comprehensive plan on the whole county is 17 years old. Later than 10.
Like what's being discussed is, I've noticed this trend too about having family members move onto their lots and stuff. And one of the things that we did up north in that regard is a lot of times we would just make a stipulation that as long as that person was around, they'd approve it. But if when the time came and they passed or something, then generally that ability went away.
Not
So
true.
there's ways to take care of that kind of situation also.
Well, it'd be a little bit like a conditional use permit on a pig barn, wherever, is when it changes ownership. If it was grandfathered in or changes ownership, that person has to come and reapply.
Right.
That's what I said, it should have a CUP.
Yeah. In that sense, but, you know, you run into, yeah, you know, the biggest issue with like this multi-family home or two-family homes and stuff like that, you've got kind of an elephant in the room on that thing too, as far as trying to, okay, something happens that, you know, two members of the same family build this house and we're gonna live together. We had a kind of a deal like that out here, except they built two separate homes away from each other a little bit. But something happens to one or other of those, and now you're sitting there with a half a house that all of a sudden somebody you don't know was, you know, how do you sell it? How do you do anything?
So if they're dead against it,
That's what they have to consider before they build it.
Exactly.
You know, but I don't think a two-family home is a bad thing. A multifamily, I agree, that's totally
Okay.
different.
Can we compromise? We'll keep multifamily as conditional use and then have two-family as a permitted use? I mean, because the owner of the property is gonna have to be the one that says, yes, I take the risks on this and this is what I want to do. You know, it's the property owner is gonna be the one ultimately responsible. And, you know, if we want people to be able to do what they want to do on their property, I mean, you know, I guess I'm fine with moving multifamily to conditional use, but I guess if somebody wants to build a duplex to have, you know, live with their parents or something, or their kids, I don't really see an issue with it. And I think back to what Gary said, I think most of the other articles all have two-family dwellings. I think Article 5 is the only one that doesn't, you know, and that'd make it at least more compatible with the other districts.
I will not support anything with multifamily dwellings on any way, shape, or form.
Even as a conditional use permit?
No. Deleted.
What about two-family?
I think two-family would be fine.
Two-family, I'm in accordance with that. I'm not exactly sure how that wants to go, but I do not support anything with the multifamily dwellings.
Well, I mean, if you, the Hutterite colonies are all multifamily dwellings.
That's a little bit different, Dan, you know.
They're defined that way though.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying as an ability to have one as a conditional use, if somebody comes in and it doesn't meet the conditions, we certainly don't have to approve it, but by not even having the ability to do that,
No.
you know.
No, not in an ag district. If they want to build one, build it in town, but not in an ag district. No.
So if another Hoot colony comes in and wants to build a multifamily dwelling, you don't want it in the ag district?
They're allowed to, Greg.
Yeah, they're allowed to because that's a religious. That's state religion separation.
Okay, so you're against it other than for religious reasons?
Yep.
You have to meet the qualifications set forth by the state. Where you're exempt.
So I just wanted to be clear where the line was being drawn. So for religious reasons, it's okay. But if you're a farmer and you want to put up a apartment building for some migrant labor, you can't do it.
No.
Okay, I just wondering where you're at. I'm okay with putting multifamily in the conditional use and leaving two-family in principal use. That's fine with me.
I'm just afraid somewhere down the line that multifamily will get diluted and there's gonna be problems.
Where do we stand on the two-family then?
Two-family can stay, I believe is what he said earlier.
Well,
Yeah,
we
I'm
would,
all right with that.
as a permitted use?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'd like two-family as a permitted use. I'd like the ability to have a multifamily as a conditional use, but I guess I'm willing to compromise. If that's not wanted, I will
We've had
consider.
that conversation 3 times now.
You won, Zane. You won.
No, it's not about winning or losing.
No, I know.
It's 10 after 9, we've had that same discussion.
Probably-
Well, let's move on. So what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? We gonna leave?
My day started a long, long time ago, and so did a lot of other guys. And all of us probably.
Are there any other questions in 503?
But at parks, I don't understand that parks.
Now you don't like parks either out in the country?
No, I said I didn't understand it.
Wasn't that in?
What if I want to turn my acreage into a park and donate it to the county? I can't do it in an ag district.
As long as you use John Deere equipment, I'll come over to it, not international.
Oh my, no way, no
He's an
way.
international
No,
boy.
That's, yeah. well,
that's,
That was, Dan was trying to move some of the things from conditional use to permitted. Yeah, parks was one.
I thought it was park.
Yeah, it's a
They have to be
conditional.
on there, because I've heard that discussions.
Okay, can I just say one thing about the park thing?
Sure.
This is within the city of Yankton. So, I mean, I realize that's a different set of criteria, but if you own a mobile home park, you are required that you either have a playground for those kids or it's built within a certain distance of a park so the kids have a place to play. So theoretically, since mobile home parks are allowed as a principal use, a permitted use in an ag district, but you still can't have a park.
I'm not saying that at all. I just wondered about it. That's all. I had no idea.
Okay, but I'm just saying that would be a reason why someone might want to build a park.
Yeah, no, I just
That would be a reason.
didn't even know why I was here, because I know it was in another section.
Okay,
Yeah, I think from what
I just didn't know what the hell was there for.
yeah, I think what we've heard is there's some interest in just creating some kids parks in some different areas, and just people don't
there's a-
necessarily want to go through the CUP process.
There's a county out West River that literally there was an old schoolhouse there. And they took the old schoolhouse down and they built a park. There's swing set, everything there.
Yeah, I mean, if it went through the CUP process, like what would you even regulate on it? Is there's a lot of parks now that are just some trees, and so I guess I don't know what you'd regulate on it as a CUP.
what if you had a lot of smelly kids there that you had to keep them back a quarter mile? I think you better put a setback on that too.
Quarter mile?
That might be one thing you want to do anyway, so they're not.
Either that or provide a bathtub at the park.
Right. As long as there's under 50 people there, it's okay.
No, it's 10.
But now when you guys are saying that, so and I'm all for it, but now all of a sudden, if you put a park in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden somebody wants to build a K-flow or something, now do we have to have a 1,320-foot setback from that?
I think the setback is just from residential dwellings, from what I understand, but I'm not.
Oh, I know.
That's what it says.
The moms will be in because they're
well,
gonna
then they'll
smell.
probably go to a different park.
Yeah, I don't know, it was just something that, like I said,
I think we're trying to make up things that are wrong. I think that's crazy.
I've seen it all in this place.
Think of the children.
Now let's.
It has not come up I guess, and I don't see it here any place that we had talked
Can't
about.
build a park, but we might want a CAFO there.
Talked with Gary just a little bit about was, well, we ran into the issues where on the 20-acre rule where people want to build a house and, or buy, you know, give it to their kids or whatever to build on, and then when they go for financing, they have a minimum or a maximum amount that they'll finance. And my thought is to keep the 20-acre rule where it is, but to make a administrative exemption or however you want to do it, that zoning administrator could one time on that 20-acre property allow a plot to be made of 2 acres to accommodate the financing process. But that plot, it would only be allowed one plot on that 20 acre just to build that house, that property on that property.
I think that's a great idea.
And it would save
Well, so how do you decide which kid gets to live with you?
well,
You know, that's,
That's up to
no, but they give them 20 acres more together. I mean, you know, what I'm saying is the 20 acre minimum or
that
rule is.
that just pulls more ag ground out of production. I don't see the benefit.
I was trying to make it so that it's a simpler process to do it, other than just the fact, because they're gonna give them the 20 acres anyway, but they can't, when they go to build a house and they go to borrow the money and the financial institution won't accept more than 2 acres,
Right.
they have to plot it out at 2 acres, and I'm just trying to make it simpler for the.
That already happened out here west. Right,
Yeah,
if you give 2 boys, each got 20 acres, and they couldn't get a loan to build a house on 20 acres, so they came in here and asked for a variance and got down to 5 acres. And that's what happened there.
but what I was getting at was that plot would be recorded with that 20 acre deed, basically, so that no matter what happened, if they moved off or whatever, there could never be another plot made unless they came in for the variance.
And we talked about, starting to have that discussion about the acreage thing, and then we got, well, there's gonna be a lot of discussion on that, and maybe we need to do them all at the same time.
Food for thought.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that idea. I'm
Okay,
I don't know if we should leave it up to the administrator. I still think it almost should go to the planning and zoning, that we make that decision, so it's a little more public. That would be the only thing. They wouldn't have to ask for variance.
Right.
But what did you call it? Dennis?
Administrative process approval or whatever that you could do, because it's still gonna be recorded. I mean, they're gonna have to, when they transfer the land, that has to be recorded into those people's names, but just to come in, they're gonna still own the 20 acres, but they have to, you know, and somehow tie it so that they can't build that 2 acre house and sell the other 18 acres.
I have no issue doing that either, but I do tend to probably lean towards what Zane said. I don't know if it's not such a bad idea to go through the public process, so people understand how often this need is being asked for, and then they're probably gonna be a little more understanding of why things have changed in the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah, because we even had farmers come in that want to deed off, they're gonna build a new house, and the bank says the same thing, and they own 320 acres, you know, or half a section. Well, we just want to deed off this 2 parts so we can get, because that bank will come in and snag that house, but they don't want that 320 acres, which is foolish. Somebody else already got their figure with that. But I don't know, I think that's a great idea.
Worth discussion.
Something at least to talk around and be thinking about, you know, that would be a positive move, I think, to have in there or something. Other than that, it's that kind of thing.
Good idea, though. Good. You guys want to call it a night?
I'll second that.
I'll third it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm ready too.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks a lot.
It was easier to do them guys here, and I don't know if they got this figured out. Last week it was at some time when I was home.
Well, part of it is, there's